Hello, and welcome to Turtle Talk, a podcast run by students at Flagler College in St. Augustine, Florida. There are 3 types of sea turtles that can be found in the oceans and intercoastal waterways surrounding St. Augustine. However, sea turtles locally and globally alike face population decline caused by things like poaching, entanglement, bycatch, pollution, and more. Although the threats sea turtles face are part of a global issue, turtles are keystone species, which makes them vital to each of the ecosystems they inhabit. Keystone species have huge socioeconomic benefits due to their ability to regulate and maintain ecosystem balances. Working locally to protect populations is one of the most effective ways to prevent population decline, which affects marine biodiversity, ecosystems, and socioeconomic factors on both a global and local level. By speaking to scientists and volunteers who are local to St. Augustine, we hope to spread awareness to this issue and inspire local action in our community.
So, for starters, I know your name, but who are you and what's your position at the Whitney Lab?
Okay, so my name is Catherine Eastman, and I am the Sea Turtle Program Manager at the University of Florida Whitney Laboratory.
One of the main questions I wanted to ask, what are the biggest threats to sea turtles globally versus locally here in St. Augustine and the Northeast Florida area?
Managing an endangered species is a challenging thing. I'll say that first off. Because they're global travelers at different life stages, it's a hard group of animals to manage. We can work as hard as we possibly can in our country and in our state to protect the resources that they use here, only to be fished, in the Mediterranean or something.
I see.
It's not that cut and dry, but so there is a global kind of an international society of folks that do conservation and research with sea turtles, and so there's annual meetings and a lot of researchers in our country will work also in parallel with other researchers in other countries. So trying to globally conserve these 7 species of sea turtles. So what does conservation look like at our local level or in Florida? We have a really distinct, important population of loggerhead turtles that nest in the southeastern United States, particularly Florida. It's a globally significant population, which means pretty much all of them in the Atlantic are nesting here. There's another distinct population that nest in Oman in the Middle East. So when you're comprised of almost all, or at least half of the nesting area for a particular species, you look for sandy beaches, and that's a critical thing for nesting turtles. That's also a place that people put houses and businesses, and whether it's in Florida, the coastline is the desired place to be and live. So a sandy beach is what's needed for turtles. Highly eroding beaches, oftentimes in Florida, end up with seawalls, which would be a hardened structure that basically takes out the ability for the beach to naturally build and erode. So when you put in a seawall, the best way to manage in front of a seawall is to have a routine of beach renourishment. So mechanically putting sand there, because the natural ebb and flow of that sand, it's no longer, it's stuck. So the long-winded answer is protecting sandy beaches is a very critical part of management for sea turtles in Florida. There's not enough of a statewide effort connecting to make sure we have a full coastline of sandy beaches. What's good for turtles is good for people.
So what are the effects of declining sea turtle populations in St. Augustine?
Going back to how they don't really stay in one place. It's hard. We see more juvenile green turtles today than we did 20 years ago. So we're seeing more of them. Certainly our hospital is busy, like every year it's busier than the previous year with sick and injured patients. So that would tell you that there is an increasing population of juvenile green turtles in this area. It's hard when you have a long-lived animal like sea turtles. To reach sexual maturity could be 15 to 25 years old. They could live 100 years old. So They can reproduce for, we think, over 30 years. We need a lot of time to be able to say, how are they doing? Really, to answer the question. So I would say I'm cautiously optimistic about how turtles are doing in Florida.
So next one was, what are options for locals to support turtles?
I try to look at like ways you can give, whether you give time through volunteer efforts, through beach cleanups, community cleanups, involving in your community water quality task forces, things like that. So you don't have to hands-on touch a turtle to help a turtle. The biggest challenge that I have bringing in money is to pay for the humans that actually are up all night breathing for an animal after surgery, or, they effort for multiple times a day for however many days it takes to get them through the process. And that's dedication. So being involved, getting involved in your own way, in whatever your cause or mission is to me the best way that you can give. Because whether it's your time, and someday you have the means to be able to kick in $20 at a food bank or something like that, you're helping someone. And that, I think, is the most rewarding part of all of this, is being able to help.
Last question I have listed. What would you like the general public to know about sea turtle conservation?
My husband and I have always said what's good for sea turtles is good for humans. And so, having those connections and understanding, connecting with wildlife or natural places helps you protect what you love. Trying to make choices in your life or in our lives that we think several steps out. Single-use plastic is a real rip. That's where our big challenge is. When I buy something, I use it for 10 minutes and I throw it away. But that is not only plastic. That applies to this whole consumable culture that we are. We get advertised on social media. We need things. So this whole consumptive culture is digging us into a deeper problem.
So what conservation methods were put into practice at the Gumbo Limbo Environmental Complex, and how were you involved specifically?
When I was in college, when I was an undergrad at Florida Atlantic University, so FAU, down in Boca Raton, which is where Gumbo Limbo Environmental Complex is, I worked there as one of their marine turtle specialists. So I did beach nesting sea turtle work. And so that was kind of what started Gumbo Limbo way before I was ever there. Boca Raton has 5 miles of beach, super densely populated with loggerhead sea turtles and green sea turtles and leatherbacks. So being such a small stretch of beach, but having lots of turtles, you have to mark off all those nests. So during the nesting season, Gumbo Limbo would hire mostly college students to do turtle monitoring. And that was every morning at sunrise. And we would ride ATVs the whole stretch of the 5 miles of beach and mark off new turtle nests. And then when it's time for the nest to hatch, then you're looking for little tiny turtle tracks coming out of nest areas, in addition to big adult tracks coming out of the sea to lay a new nest.
And then I think we kind of touched on this in last meeting, but what conservation methods were most effective in your line of work?
Working with sick turtles, particularly ones that are impacted with the FP or the fibropapilloma disease, is kind of the area of conservation that we're working now. So we're trying to rehab and make healthy sick and injured turtles, at the same time trying to dive deeper into, from a research standpoint, into the illness, and trying to understand how this illness is spread, how this disease is spread, looking at pretty much what has to happen for the turtles to express or contract this disease, or if they have a virus that's sort of latent or asleep in their system, what has to happen that to express itself, for us to see these tumors.
One more for you,
Sure thing.
and that's what sort of conservation efforts do you perform at Whitney Labs? Which again, it kind of touches on previous thing, but expand
Sure.
on it.
Yeah. And I think there's a couple of things. We take in any of the washback sea turtles, so the little guys that their habitat of the seaweed gets blown in onto the beach. They were at the wrong place at the wrong time.
Yeah.
And so we set up a whole separate area for them, and they get fed, 4 to 5 times a day, and until they're either strong enough, or there's an available boat ride somewhere off the East Coast down to Florida. But sometimes it's, a couple hundred to, almost 1,000 little tiny turtles being transferred back out to their habitat. And that's a huge potential pulse into a population. So we're giving them a better chance by getting them right to where they need to go. So that is another aspect of conservation that we do here that I'm directly involved in. There's a lab here, Dr. Osborne, that works on clam and oyster restoration and how that helps with water clarity and quality. And so that's related, because areas that he places these restoration clams are in inshore waterways where actually our green turtles live and where manatees live.
For the critic who hears all this and says, so what? Like, so what? What would your response be?
You know the game Jenga?
Yeah.
Okay. So think of Jenga as an ecosystem or a bunch of ecosystems. So all of us working together, living together. And when you pull out a piece, and each piece in this analogy can represent a species or a habitat type. And it's only a matter of time before you pull the wrong piece out and that whole Jenga tower collapses. We don't know which Jenga piece is going to cause that collapse. And when the tower collapses, it's everybody. It's not like we are immune to that.
Awesome.
True.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much.
Hello, my name is Maleec Blakney. Welcome to another round of Turtle Talk. Today we're going to have a local scientist spotlight. And for today's spotlight, we have Josalyn Gomez. She works with the Whitney Laboratory for Marine Bioscience and said she was given an opportunity as a kid to go to Turtle Hospital in Marathon, which is located in the famous Florida Keys. She said as a kid, she saw how much success they had in rehabilitating sea turtles and how much passion they had, and their position piqued her interest in aquatic rescue and rehabilitation. The successful use of environmental education through public tours of their facilities and posters and infographics at their facilities allowed her to understand the importance of their work even at a young age. At the Whitney Laboratory for Marine Bioscience, as a volunteer, one of her tasks include tank maintenance, which means she cleans the tanks and ensures the water in the tanks is sterile, yet similar to the water that turtles would experience in the ocean, which means the salinity levels and stuff like that. She will also create green feeders, which consist of sea lettuce, regular lettuce, cucumbers, and peppers. Seafood diets, which consist of shrimp, squid, mackerel, and sometimes other small fish. She feeds the turtle the greens and helps with shots and post-surgery site treatments when necessary. Her favorite part of the job would be engaging with the public at releases. The hospital invites the community to come and watch the send-off of fully rehabilitated patients, and they take the time to educate them about the turtle's backstory and how far it has come when it was rescued. I think this is the most important part of the process. I met the woman who rescued Alan Wrench, our most recent release, and the amount of pride and joy she had in seeing him healthy was very heartwarming, and it explains why staff members like Dr. B, Kaylee, Devon, and Tori keep up the amazing work. An example of what she would do on a day-to-day basis at the hospital would be one of their sicker patients, a turtle, needed a feeding tube to get proper nutrition each day. She was able to help the team in carrying out this more complicated procedure. It is an amazing hands-on learning environment. Josalyn has hopes for the future of sea turtle conservation efforts and that more legislation is passed on safer boating laws in the marinas for marine life. Most of the injured patients come from St. Augustine marinas and places like it due to the reckless driving of some boat captains. By making and enforcing stricter laws, we can protect turtle populations from life-threatening boat strikes. And she also recommends that everybody takes a tour of the facility, as they never know when they may discover a passion that they had for environmental rehabilitation. Thank you for your time. Signing off.
My name is Bry Reilly, and I'm here with Dr. McGinley. If you want to start with introducing yourself, what you do, and what sparked your interest in sea turtles.
Sure. So my name is Dr. Ed McGinley. I'm an associate professor of natural sciences here at Flagler College. I, by training, am a fish biologist, a marine fish biologist, but we have an awesome opportunity here to look at sea turtles because they feed at our local marinas. So we were able to start a project on sea turtles without having to get in the water or disturb the turtles just by going to our local marinas.
Okay, awesome. What would you say are some interesting facts about sea turtles?
One I just learned, because I'm still learning about sea turtles and life history, is they actually shed their shell. Little pieces of the shell flake off as the turtle grows. Mm-hmm. So it's not exactly like shedding an exoskeleton, but I've seen turtles and I'm like, oh my gosh, what's going wrong with the turtles? But it's actually natural for them to flake off parts of their shell at a time.
Okay, cool. That's really interesting. How long have you been working with sea turtles?
This started in June of 2020.
Okay. Have you noticed any patterns or trends in their population decline or up or down? Like maybe what causes that?
So we are starting to get to the point where we are getting several years worth of data. So in my data analysis, I have about 18 months of data, and that's 2020, June 2020 through December 2021. And the project is still ongoing, so we have another year's worth of data we just have not input yet. Some of the cool things we have seen is that it's not a surprise, but water temperature influences the number of turtles we see. So the warmer months, we typically see more turtles than marinas, but we do have turtles here in the winter. I think probably the coolest thing we have found is the two marinas we go to. We don't see turtles that we observe at one marina move to the other marina. Once they are at a marina feeding, we only see them at that marina.
Okay, yeah, that's really interesting. And has there been anything about fishery bycatch resulting, or have you read anything about that? Because I know we read that fishery bycatch was one of the leading causes of death and injury in sea turtles, as well as the just climate change, with how they determine if they'll be male or female and stuff like that.
So the turtles we have here in the intracoastal are all juveniles. So another kind of interesting thing about sea turtles, after sea turtles hatch near their native beach, they will head out, and here in the western Atlantic, we never really knew where they went after that. It was called the Lost Years. Mm-hmm. And there's a group in Central Florida, led by Kate Mansfield, who put little backpack satellite receivers on them, and they go out to the floating mats of Sargassum by Bermuda and kind of hang out there for a couple years. Then they come back in to coastal areas. The ones that we see inshore in the intercoastal are all juveniles.
Okay.
So these are probably 30 to 50 millimeter turtles. So the ones in here, they're not going to be as impacted by something like commercial fishing you might have offshore, that the shrimpers have to have the turtle excluder devices, the TED devices. The main issues here inshore, and partnering with the Sea Turtle Hospital, fishing hooks from recreational fishermen. Probably the biggest impact inshore are boat strikes. Turtles congregate at marinas where you have lots of boats. There's no boat speed limit in the intercoastal here in front of downtown. Mm-hmm. Turtles are fairly slow moving. They're not going to be like a dolphin that can get out of the way fairly quick. So boat strikes are probably one of the major causes of mortality we see.
Do you think that enforcing, if there were to be a law made saying this is the speed limit, do you think that would make a huge difference, or that they would enforce it as much?
Yeah, we have a speed limit in place, and there's enough people to enforce it, and everyone abides by it. Absolutely. Mm-hmm. I think it would have a pretty big impact. We see lots of turtles that have old scar injuries. I've seen quite a few dead sea turtles that it was obvious it was a boat strike. The problem is, since we do see turtles year-round, maybe if we coupled it with something when the manatees are here, because manatees have the
That's
same
what I was
issue.
going to say. Yeah, I remember hearing about that.
Yeah, so the manatees, I've seen them outside of this time frame, but I think the placards around town say like May through October.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, when we have kind of this warmer time where folks like to be outside, having a boat speed limit, maybe since we've seen the majority of the turtles at marinas, maybe something just like in the downtown footprint
Mm-hmm.
instead of outside of the downtown footprint. Honestly, I think that would have a pretty big effect.
Okay. So you would say that the most significant threat here to sea turtles would be the boat strikes?
It would be top two.
There. Okay.
So the second impact is, I don't know if you've come across this in your reading, is FP, fibropapilloma. I always get the name wrong.
Is that what the sea turtle hospital deals
Yes.
with? Okay.
So it is a type of viral infection, and it leads to tumors on the soft tissue.
Okay.
So the acronym is FP because the name is like fibropapillomatosis, and it is, I believe, related to the herpes virus.
Okay.
So it's a viral infection, and they get these tumors. They can be external or internal.
Mm-hmm.
I've seen sea turtles that have their eyes kind of covered over with tumors.
Yeah.
When they go to the sea turtle hospital, they'll do CAT scans to look at the internal structures, and a lot of times they'll have internal tumors. And if the tumor load is too high, the turtle does have to be euthanized.
Oh, wow.
So they can recover from it, but there's not a lot of information on what are the causes of it. One of the future areas of research that Leslie Palmer and I are going to try to work on with Greg Miller here in the department is looking at some of the pollution in the water, some of the different chemicals, whether it be petroleum byproducts like gas or oil, biofouling paint, pesticides that wash in, to see if those levels are at a kind of concerning level that might stress the turtle out, making them more susceptible to some kind of viral infection.
So you think that it might be human caused, like not so much like a genetic type thing, or?
It's interesting because I was at a virtual conference kind of in the height of COVID that the Whitney Lab hosted, and it's similar to a face cancer that Tasmanian devils actually get. And they transmit it they bite each other a lot during fighting.
Mm-hmm.
So the FP is kind of related to that as well. Like I said, there's probably a genetic component. A paper came out not too long ago that said all green sea turtles in the Indian River Lagoon most likely have FP, and most recover from it. The Indian River Lagoon versus our waterway here is much more closed off, so anything that gets in there kind of stays in there. I would love to point a finger and say, it is us doing this. It's definitely pollution and stuff we're putting in the water, and I think there's probably a genetic component that makes some more susceptible to others.
Okay.
After hearing about the dedicated local sea turtle conservation efforts in St. Augustine, we would like to take a moment to thank each of our interviewees. Firstly, we would like to thank Kat Eastman, the Sea Turtle Hospital Program Manager at the Whitney Lab. She provided great details on the various threats that sea turtles at her lab face and the amazing work that her lab does. The Whitney Lab is a great local sea turtle conservation site with many volunteer and internship opportunities for locals. We would also like to thank Dr. McGinley, a professor of natural sciences here at Flagler College. His work with students to locally observe green sea turtles in St. Augustine marinas has generated mass amounts of local monitoring, which acts as a baseline for monitoring sea turtle populations in our area. The research team at Flagler College is a testament to the importance of local monitoring, research, and volunteer work, and the importance of long-term monitoring efforts such as this one. Lastly, we would like to thank our fellow Coastal Environmental Science major, Josalyn, for her time. Her volunteer work is very important to our community, and she sets an example for all of our peers. If you are looking for a way to make a difference in your own local community, it is best to reach out to local sea turtle organizations to look for volunteer work. But there are many other ways you can take action. This includes volunteering to remove plastic waste from your local community water sources, spreading information and awareness about the plastic pollution threat to sea turtles, and more. Locally strengthening sea turtle populations helps to build resilience across ecosystems globally, so we encourage all to find local ways to participate in sea turtle conservation.